Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into true crime cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of true crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
And I'm Megan.
And welcome to part 2, Megan.
I'm so excited. Part 2/3.
Yes, part 2, kind of 3. That is for sure. If you listen to episode 190 and then 191 before this.
You have to. Go back if you have not.
Yeah, don't start here.
It's
if you're
bad.
new to Crime Curious, hi, hello, thanks for listening. But go back 2 episodes so that you are caught up, please. Otherwise, this will not make any sense to you. So where I left you with.
Oh, jump right in.
I left you with the police telling Victor and Danny Piquette's family that they believe that his death was a hunting accident. They've got the bullet from
a
hunting
stray bullet
rifle. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to introduce some new players that I haven't introduced yet. And this is where it's going to get juicy for you, Miss Megan.
Okay. Give me the drama, mama.
Remember... Just start saying that from now on. I really like that. Remember Denise Messier, Danny's ex. She is currently hiding in 1985 and during Danny's murder. She and her daughters are hiding in Anchorage, Alaska. Well, Denise's brother, his name is Philip Messier. He's married to a woman named Kathleen McGuire. Now, Kathleen was a lawyer in 1985. Working in her new role as Assistant Attorney General.
Okay. She's prosecuting cases.
Mm-hmm. In the summer of 1985, Melanie, Denise's daughter that Danny adopted so that she would have the same last name
The
as
oldest
them,
one,
the
who's
oldest,
like 10 or 11 or something.
She
was when they left.
Yes. Now she is a 15-year-old girl.
Oh, shit. She's been gone a few years.
They've been gone for 4 years. So what happens in 1985, just before Danny's murder, the summer before Danny's murder, Melanie goes and has a visit with her uncle, Philip, and her aunt, Kathleen.
In the same hometown as her adoptive father?
In Hopkinton, New Hampshire, which is 30 minutes away from where Danny lives in Hooksett.
Okay.
No, Danny does not know that Melanie is there. Okay. Danny has not seen his ex-wife Denise or those children, his children or Melanie, his adoptive daughter, since 1981. So this visit is a secret. But Melanie loved it at her uncle's, and she was struggling at the time to get along with her mother in Alaska. She hated living in Alaska.
She was a teenage girl. They,
absolutely.
at some point in time, hate their moms and hate where they live and hate everything.
Life is stupid.
I don't like how my socks feel.
Right.
This lipstick is too pink.
Correct.
Right.
So that August in 1985, after the summer visit went so well, Philip Messier convinced his sister Denise to let Melanie move in with them and attend Hopkinton High.
This is an interesting game they're playing.
So she was a sophomore, Melanie that is. She was also a brilliant soccer player, and she was allowed to play on the boys' soccer team because there was not a girls' soccer team like there was in Alaska. And no one in Danny's family knew that Melanie was back. During the investigation, remember, Victor said, hey, there's a whole family that does not like my brother. And
that's right.
His ex-wife has been gone for 4 years.
The Messiers.
Mm-hmm. So the police follow up on this, and they discover in their investigation, now the Messiers, Kathleen McGuire and Philip Messier, husband and wife, do cooperate with the investigation, and they discover that Melanie is back. And Victor's like convinced that the Messier family would have the most to gain from Danny's death. After all, Denise has been hiding somewhere for 4 years.
And he still has some custodial rights to the children.
Yes, he has every weekend visit.
Right. And
he hasn't been able to exercise that because the kids have been gone. They were taken.
So let's take him out of the picture.
And that's what Victor's saying.
Right.
Is he's like, listen, they would have the most to gain because then Denise could come back with her kids and be with her family and not have to live in Alaska anymore. So the police do go and investigate this. At this same time that this is happening, another sibling of Philip Messier was caught embezzling, another sister was caught embezzling $25,000 from her employer. Now, this does not look good for Kathleen McGuire, the new assistant attorney general, that her married family
is involved in some crimes
for embezzlement. Yep. And now also suspected as being part of the murder.
Girl, it's a small town. We can't help what our families do.
Correct. When police investigated where the money, that the embezzled money went, there was not a lot accounted for. Okay. Which more than likely, this woman probably spent on like non-material goods and consumables.
Sure.
Like expensive dinners out.
Services.
Gas.
Dinners,
yeah. That kind of thing. But to Victor, this looked suspicious. Did she pay cash to have Danny killed? And was Kathleen McGuire somehow pulling strings to cover this up from her position?
Oh, no.
I will say this right now. Kathleen and her husband, Phil,
exonerated,
always cooperated with any questions from the police. And to this day, no evidence has come forth to suggest that they had any involvement or prior acknowledge of the embezzlement or the murder of Danny. Kathleen worked her way through the ranks really fast. In 1988, she became chief of the Criminal Bureau for only 1 year before she then became a judge. And then in 1989 became an associate judge on the New Hampshire Supreme Court.
Okay.
So she's a Supreme Court justice. And it just, from Victor's point of view, but remember where he's coming from. He's coming from a 17-year-old child who lost his mother in a way that authorities ruled as being a suicide, and it clearly was not a suicide. And so he doesn't trust anybody in authority.
No.
At all.
Especially because, as you told us before, there's a number of law enforcement officers locally who understood that it wasn't a suicide, and there seemed to be some type of a bureaucracy, a bureaucratic decision being made.
So I can see how, from his point of view, this looks extremely suspicious. There is Kathleen McGuire who is in authority, has jobs of authority, and her married family hates his brother. One of them is embezzling. Jesus, Charnell.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah, money, and there's money unaccounted for. I can see how Victor's like, this tracks. Okay,
yeah, there's something fishy. Mm-hmm. Hinky, if we're going to go technical with
I like that.
It's a police officer term. Things are hinky.
It is very true. So they keep the case open, but I'm going to tell you that over the years, Victor, I do really love this. Roland Lammy is the lead investigator on Danny's case very early on. Okay, I believe it was from day one. And so Victor kind of starts this thing where every year, because remember, right now, they're keeping the case open, but it's chalked up as a hunting accident. Yes. They're not closing it, but they're saying it's a hunting accident. And they did ask hunters to bring their rifles forward to try to match it up. Some did, lots didn't.
Right.
I'm
not getting involved in this shit.
Correct. I don't want it pinned on me. I know I wasn't anywhere near those woods. Right. So, I mean, they did try. But Victor made it a point to call Roland Lammy every November to ask, this is how it went. Okay, this is Victor. I want to know what you're doing to solve my brother's murder. And Roland Lammy would always say, we've not forgotten about your brother's case. The case remains open, and if we get more evidence, we will follow those leads. Victor always then said, fuck you, and hangs up.
Oh, this was just his Thanksgiving tradition.
Mm-hmm. Every November, this went on for years, and it became a thing. Roland would expect this phone call to come.
I'm about to get my fuck you very much message from Victor.
It's November. Patch Victor through. It's time to get my fuck you. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. So
I appreciate his willingness just to accept the fuck you, by the way.
Yes, exactly. And understand where it's coming from.
When you're a public servant, you take it sometimes.
And I think
I accept your opinion. Swear at me if you would like.
Really, the investigators did want this solved, but they weren't lying. They're within the jurisdiction of their job.
That's all they got.
If new information comes forward, we will investigate it, right? I'm going to tell you that there were rumors around town. Tips were called in and leads were followed up with, but nothing that the police felt that they could move on. So now I'm going to take you back to part one. Where we started part one, I told you that Edward Coolidge was released in 1991. Remember, Edward Coolidge killed Pamela Mason.
You're bringing Edward back to me?
We're bringing Edward back for just a minute.
Okay.
Edward Coolidge killed Pamela Mason. He most definitely killed Sandra Valade, but was never charged for that murder because the attorney at the time said, we got him for 1, no need to get him for 2. Edward Coolidge was highly thought, he was never questioned about, but since Rena Piquette, Danny's mother, had information that Edward was the killer of Pamela Mason, she called those tips in, spoke to the police, and was dead 2 days later.
Correct.
So he's released on a technicality in 1991 because of an illegal search and seizure of his vehicle. And just prior to his release, and they knew he was about to be released, a friend of Victor Piquette, his name was Richard Barron, he had a theory that Danny's death and Rena's death were somehow connected. Now, this came out after Danny's death. Investigators were collecting information on Danny, and they discovered that while Danny was in the mental hospital, remember he went to the mental hospital when Denise Messier left him for an entire year? In the hospital, he underwent hypnosis. And in those hypnosis sessions, he recalled the morning of his mother's death, seeing his mother argue with a man at the house who was wearing a white coat. Now, Edward Coolidge...
that's never come up before.
It has not. And Edward Coolidge did wear a white coat. He was a bakery delivery driver, and this was his uniform. So the information was confusing because the police reports at the time said that Danny slept until 10 o'clock and never saw his mother. He woke up at 10. He was looking around the house trying to find her, if you remember from part 1 there.
He called his Uncle John.
Yes. And Danny's not here to clarify this information. I'm going to tell you, though, that sometimes during traumatic events, our brain will literally block out information as a coping mechanism. So there are things that you might not remember until you are in an altered state of consciousness, like hypnosis. But again, Danny's not here. It's 1991, and Danny's not here to clarify, to ask about this hypnosis session. But this information, Richard Barron is like, I'm going to make myself investigator. I'm going to do some things and see if these are connected. So Barron finds and interviews the first responder on the scene that day that Rena was found. And this man's name is David Lorne. So he is a first responder. He saw Rena Piquette in that barn, lying flat on her back, arms and legs sprawled out, burnt, but not withered. All right. So this first responder informed Richard Barron that there were things from that scene that bothered him. There was a large log that was braced over the door. There was no way that Rena could have lifted it or braced it against the door herself, especially from inside of the barn. They all assumed that it was a murder, so all the first responders and the police were surprised to hear that it was ruled a suicide. And whenever anyone was questioned about it, they were told by the Attorney General, William Maynard at the time, to just let it go. It was discussed a lot at the time between the police officers, but their hands were tied. It was 1964, and their boss essentially was giving them an order.
Something's up, man.
So Richard Barron is interviewing and making himself super sleuth on the case. And they start talking to the media. They want movement on this. And they got a TV special where people reenact Danny's death in 1991. So they got a TV special where they went over Rena's murder, and then they have people reenact Danny's death. They also, because of this TV special and this media attention, they did get permission to exhume Rena's body and have it re-examined by a state medical examiner, because at the time in 1964, when she died, there wasn't a state medical examiner.
Yeah, just a regular county medical examiner. And just let me point out, her body went
to Harvard.
Oh, they did send it to Harvard. Yeah. That's right. Okay.
Yep. So now they're having a state medical examiner exhume her body and do another autopsy. So the record keeping of 1964 they discover not as thorough as they were in 1991 or even today, of course. So they didn't have a ton of comparatives. They didn't have a lot of photos. They didn't have very good documentation at all. So the medical examiner is not able to tell her exact cause of death, but he was able to change her death certificate to undetermined so that it no longer read suicide. Which I think, I mean, that in itself is good for the family. What were you going to point out?
Oh, no, I was just talking about with county medical examiners at the time, but they were sent to Harvard. So county medical examiners in small towns are actually usually just one physician in your town is how they used to be. They may not even necessarily have had a specialty. Right. I mean, at one point in time in our town, a local pediatrician was a medical examiner. Yep. So anyway, it didn't matter. Disregard because it went to Harvard. But I do find it interesting. And I think I had asked, way back 2 episodes ago, if they were ever able to find, because of the extent of the burns on her body, any type of blunt force trauma or anything like that. But even exhuming her body and with the new assessment, they couldn't find anything.
Right. But the examiner did tell Victor Piquette that the fact, the way that she was found.
Yeah. They have to take the scene into consideration, which is why there's often a conversation with law enforcement. Sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad. But in this situation, how could you rule it a suicide knowing that she was barred in with, with a log, like the door was blocked, so she couldn't get out. And we know that the way that if she succumbed to fire, it would have been a lot different. Her body would have, right?
Yes.
She was laying there as if she was burned after she had been killed. There was no movements. There wasn't any of the weird facial or hand, like with your arms, they like curl up and things like that.
Nothing
Sorry
like
to be gross, but that's what happens.
I mean, that's just the truth of it. Yep. Yeah. And there was none of that. And that bothered this state medical examiner. Okay. He's like, no. And that is why he was willing to take suicide off the death certificate.
I appreciate his professionalism. And your name's on the line at this point.
Yes,
you have
exactly.
You have to do what is the right thing to do, whether people like it or not.
Yep. So he most definitely was like, nope, I am not going to say that this is suicide, not with the way that she was found. We do have to put undetermined because he could not come up with the exact, cause. But it's been years. So this was good for the family, at least to have that. But all of this was because Richard Barron had suspected that these 2 murders were connected. Well, then in March 1992, the family, along with Richard Barron, so by now Edward Coolidge has been released and the TV special has been done to try to connect the 2 murders. In March 1992, Richard Barron and members of the family, including Victor, went on a local daytime talk show once again, stating the case, its possible connection to Rena's unsolved murder, and asked the public to come forward with any information. What are the chances that one family is struck with 2 tragedies like this? So within a week, 2 mysterious letters show up without authors, and they are typed out on typewriter. The letters implicated a man named Eric Windhurst and Melanie Piquette, who would have been 17 at the time of the Danny's murder. Richard Barron passed those letters on to Detective Roland Lammy, and he informed Lammy that a female who would not identify herself called Richard Barron and said that Melanie Piquette had bragged to her in high school about how she had her stepfather killed. So Roland Lammy knew this was not the first time that Eric's name had come up in the investigation, but Eric had been questioned in 1985 and had a solid alibi. Plus, there was only 32, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said 18 inches total of Danny's body exposed, and there was 32 inches of Danny's body exposed. I apologize.
That's okay. We've listened to men talk long enough that I understand people might misinterpret inches.
The measuring system's complicated.
Measuring is hard.
Mm-hmm. So I must have just typed it differently or
it was metric.
Yes. All right. So,
but just to get this straight, Melanie is the oldest daughter.
Yeah,
the adopted
daughter of Danny. Denise's oldest daughter,
who happens to be in town, and he doesn't know that she's there.
No idea. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And who is Eric?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay, because I need to know.
Next paragraph.
Thank you. I need to know how they know each other.
Yep. I will get to that. So the police, they questioned Eric. They did. They followed up on the leads and the tips. But given the fact that there was 32 inches of Danny's body showing, and that it would have been from over 300 yards, it was an impossible shot for a 17-year-old boy. Okay. So in 1985, Eric Windhurst was a junior in Hopkinton High and captain of the soccer team and an all-around well-liked and popular athlete. And he was friends with Melanie Piquette. Now, Melanie was new. Remember, she was a sophomore.
She's the new girl.
She's the new girl in 1985. She had visited her aunt and uncle that summer, moved there, unbeknownst to any of the Piquette family, and she's 30 minutes away from Hooksett, where Danny and his family live. So she's a great soccer player, and Eric is the captain of the soccer team. So, and like I said, they let Melanie be on the soccer team.
She's on the boys' soccer team.
Yep, she's on the boys' soccer team.
No girls. Equivalent.
Eric and Melanie developed a sister-brother type relationship, and on the day of Danny Piquette's murder, Eric and Melanie were at a state championship game for one of the teams at the school that was many miles out of town.
Oh, then it wasn't the alibi.
So in 1985, the tips and rumors that Eric was bragging about shooting a man were followed up on and led nowhere based on the improbability of the shot and the fact that he was at the state.
Why do people do that?
Thing.
The bragging about something that didn't happen. Like way to screw up a case investigation.
Right. Well, and now you can see how this got so complicated for investigators, right? Yeah. Melanie Piquette was also questioned, and she was upset about her stepfather's murder, even if she was hiding from him. She also confirmed that she and Eric were at the state championship game, and that very night, Melanie left for a class trip to Quebec. So this is all confirmed by her guardians, Kathleen McGuire and Philip Messier, as well as Eric's parents. Yes, they went to the state championship game together, and then they got home in time for Melanie to get on the bus to go to her school trip to Quebec.
And just let me point out that it is obvious he doesn't know she's there, because with his mental issues that he's had before and his need to find his family.
Oh, yeah.
If he knew she was around or had an inkling, he would have been stalking.
Definitely.
He would have been over there.
Definitely. He would have attempted
So
to
why
make
would
contact.
they have drawn attention to themselves by doing this?
Right. So now in 1992, with these letters in hand, they want to re-interview Eric and Melanie. Because, these letters are now saying, hey, I was a high schooler. Melanie told me that she had her stepfather killed. And then a second letter that's written by someone different is saying, I know that Eric Windhurst did this.
Oh, my.
So Eric was living in Colorado at the time. He left Hopkinton High after high school and tried to make a life for himself. When the police arrive at Eric's parents' home, his father agrees to let them take the only hunting rifle in the house, his father's rifle, and have it tested. The ballistics came back that it was negative. This was not the gun that fired the bullet. He called his son in Colorado, told him that due to some letters, he needs to get back to Hooksett so that he told his son, like, these letters are pretty damning. You need to come back and be questioned. And he did. They also contacted Melanie, who had moved to Idaho and was married with 2 children at this point in time. This is 1992. They questioned her over the phone, and she said, it's really difficult to concentrate and answer questions over the phone. Can you send me a list of questions and I will write you the responses? This is very unorthodox for a police investigation, but they agreed, and she did so. They wrote out their set of questions. She wrote out the answers back. The story never changes. They were at the state championship game, and then she went to Quebec for her
last trip.
So that's the end of the letters. The trail goes cold again. All right. Now, you have to read the book to get more of a scoop here, but there is a guy who dated Melanie just out of high school. During their relationship, she was troubled, but she shared with him that her father, Danny Piquette, used to sexually abuse her growing up. So in high school, when she moved back to New Hampshire, she had him killed.
Oh.
Okay. This relationship did not work out, and this man soon discovered there was a lot about Melanie that he could not trust. She had lied about violent acts against her. Like, for example, she said in high school she got mugged after leaving soccer practice. She also told that to Eric Windhurst. I'm just going to insert that here now, too. Eric thinks that happened as well. She also lied about being raped, and then she later came clean. So at this time, he chalks this story up as, when they're dating, as a need for attention as well. The story about Danny Piquette sexually harassing her. Yep.
Because that's a new motive.
And her having him killed.
Right.
All right. So until this man, this ex-boyfriend of hers, became a reporter in 2003. And something reminded him of this story, and it's always bothered him. So was it real? And, as a reporter, he did some digging, and he saw that Danny was in fact shot by an impossible shot in 1985. And I have to retract my statement. He became a reporter in 1993.
Oh, okay.
Not 2003.
It's okay.
Mm-hmm. So in 1993, he calls Melanie out of the blue and is like, hey, remember when you told me about
your stepfather sexually abusing you?
Yes. And that you had him killed. And she was like, yeah, she confirmed, yes, I was sexually abused by Danny Piquette. And she doesn't say the words exactly, but alludes to like knowing what happened to him and why. Then she wants to know why he cares now. And her ex-boyfriend's like, well, because if I have knowledge about a murder, I can't live with myself as a reporter, that I didn't like report on this and that I didn't tell somebody, like, is that true? Like, did you have him murdered? And Melanie's like, no, let's just drop it. So oops. Melanie just wants him to drop it.
Of all the days to pick up your phone with an unknown number. And she even like
kind of backtracks. Like, I don't even remember telling you about that. Like, yes, he did sexually abuse me, but I don't remember telling you that I had him killed, and I was really messed up back then. Okay. I lied about a lot of things. Like, that's who I was. So regardless, he does contact the Hooksett police and he gives the information to Detective Lammy. This is 1993. So Victor continues to call the department over the years. Now, of course, people have retired and taken other jobs, but he still calls.
Detective Lammy, fuck you.
Right, exactly.
Happy holidays.
Now, remember Agrafiotis?
Agrafiotis, yes. I remember you told me to remember him.
I told you to remember Agrafiotis.
The
rookie in 1985. Yep, took video and pictures of Danny Piquette's crime scene. Well, he becomes chief Agrafiotis in the mid-1990s.
Good job, buddy.
It was for another county. All right. And he always had to drive by the Piquette farm to get to his job in the other county as chief. But then in the late 1990s, Hooksett needs a new chief. And Agrafiotis was like, you know what? I think I'm the man for the job because I still live in this county, but I drive to another county to be a chief.
I'm coming back home to lead my people.
And apparently it was a really hard job to get because they had hundreds of applicants.
They used to for law enforcement jobs. It is not the same now.
It is not. But they did award it to Agrafiotis. So he is now the chief
of police
Manchester County.
Manchester. I love it.
Yep, and which includes Hooksett. So at this point, Chief Agrafiotis instructs the department to patch all calls every November from Victor Piquette right to him each year because Detective Lammy's gone.
He is retired.
All right. Agrafiotis is the only officer on the department that Victor actually didn't despise and did have some small amount of trust in over the years. So the response was still the same. Okay, so
what have you done to solve my brother's murder?
Yes, and of course Agrafiotis would say it's a cold homicide case. Only the state police and the attorney general can investigate because the local office did not have a cold case unit. And so if more information comes forward, then we can investigate.
Fuck you. Happy holidays.
Exactly.
Okay.
Get the fuck you. So now we're fast forwarding. That was the late 1990s when Agrafiotis took over as chief of Manchester. Okay, police. So now we're going to fast forward to fall 2003.
Oh, we jumped.
It's nearly 20 years since Danny's death. Chief Agrafiotis takes on a huge undertaking. Now, as I said, his department does not have a cold case unit, which means that all cold case investigations do not happen by his unit at all. But Chief Agrafiotis wants to hire a single private investigator that can just focus on Danny Piquette's case. But they will need the Attorney General's permission to even investigate a cold case. And the chief was actually really good at budgeting, so he had worked out in his budget skills to have a small amount of money available to fund the investigation as well, but that also required special permission to use the department's funds to fund a special project for a unit that they don't even have. That's supposed to be the state attorney's jurisdiction. The attorney general gives the go-ahead, and Chief Agrafiotis already has a private investigator in mind for the job. An 80-year-old retired detective named Bill Shackford.
Okay. Hi, Bill.
Yes. Bill has a slew of experience as a detective under his belt, among many other admirable accolades. Including being a Hooksett police officer until the 1970s when he retired and then went on to continue other criminal investigation works in different parts. So at the time of Danny's death, he had not worked on the case or had any connection to it, which makes him the perfect guy for the job.
Oh, we need clean eyes, new eyes.
Everything. Yeah. He is not influenced by anything. He has fresh eyes.
That's a better word. I couldn't come up.
New
clean eyes. Clean eyes. New eyes. Fresh eyes.
He's using some of that clear eye.
I've read too much cannibal stuff lately.
So the files, I'm going to tell you on the Piquette case, spanning the 20 years that it's now been at this point in time in 2003, were over 3,000 pages long, Megan. And Shackford can immediately see that there were some unorthodox techniques used, such as sending Melanie Piquette a questionnaire in the early 90s.
Yeah, I don't like it.
And accepting her responses. And the lack of the follow-up on leads like the woman who saw a dark blue car parked in the woods around the corner from the Piquette farm that she had never seen there before, and that was never followed up on. So he's seeing a couple of potential strings to pull at that weren't pulled at before.
Great. Can I throw out there, which may have nothing to do with the case, but sure. I also was wondering, like, did they look and see if there were any vets in the area or people who had sniper or sharpshooter experience? Because, again, I'm going back to with this impossible shot, it would have required some type of experience. So I just didn't know how much they had canvassed or checked on that information.
I don't know that information.
Okay.
I do think that I'm not getting the impression that they didn't do their job here. I would suspect that was probably...
There were just
a
couple leads that didn't get followed up on how this new set of eyes would have looked.
This one can seem very innocuous. This is just I saw a dark blue car that I've never seen parked before around the corner. That's all it said. It tells us nothing. So, could it just have been easily missed or just chalked up as not important because we think that this is a hunting accident? I'm not really sure. Was it purposely not followed up on? Maybe. We don't know. So Shackford hits the ground running. He interviews people all over again, even if they were interviewed before. He compares their statements. He also has the burden, Megan, of disproving the original theory of a hunting accident or shooting range accident.
Yeah.
Right? This takes time, but he's able to get those geotopical graphs that I talked about earlier in part 1 of how the shooting range's location as it related to Danny's property, and he makes a really big discovery. Something that wasn't possible to be known or seen in 1985 is that the shooting range is way farther below sea level than the Piquette property.
So it would have been the upward trajectory.
Which means the bullet would have had to travel through several hills before striking Danny Piquette right in the heart. So this completely rules out
it's not
shooting range.
It can't be the shooting range.
Not the shooting range. So he does his job and rules that out. He also follows up on tips that never were followed up, like the person that said that they saw this blue car parked, right? So Shackford tracks the tipster down. It was a woman who at the time was a teenager. She was like 14, which is another reason why I think that possibly her tip wasn't taken seriously.
Probably.
Because she was 14. And at the time, and she gave the description of the car, a small, dark blue, kind of certain make, that she took note of at the time. So Shackford looks to see who had vehicles registered in 1985 of that color and make. And guess whose name pops up?
Who?
Eric Winters.
Oh, the teenager.
The 17-year-old boy. So he's like, you know what? I think that we need to do a face-to-face interview at this point in time with Melanie Piquette. But she's in Boise, Idaho. And so they make the trip and surprise her with a visit on July 14th, 2004. At this point in time, Melanie Piquette is a stay-at-home. She's now Melanie Cooper. She was married. She's a stay-at-home mother of 5.
Okay.
They had when they knocked on the door, they really surprised her, Megan. She was in the middle of a workout.
Okay.
When she answers the door.
Hi.
Melanie would later say that she knew this day would eventually come. She makes the decision that she has ran long enough and it's time to talk.
Shit.
So Shackford and the 2 Hooksett police officers that he brought with him on this trip were shocked that she was willing to talk to them without a warrant or anything like that, right? Melanie told them the truth, or her version of the truth. She told them right away that yes, I told Eric Windhurst that my stepfather, Danny Piquette, had sexually abused me as a child and that I was in hiding from him. She had went to counseling with her Aunt Kathleen McGuire because the two were not getting along in the fall of 1985.
So she didn't get along with mom, so she moved, and now she's not getting along with aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Who is her legal guardian and an attorney general.
Mm-hmm. And so, Kathleen McGuire was like, let's get some counseling. Let's work together in counseling. This is just shortly after she moved in. And she didn't want to go back to Alaska and live with her mom. So she really wanted to make it work with Kathleen. So they agreed to go to counseling. Melanie told the counselor of the reason that they were hiding from Danny was due to the sexual abuse, which the counselor was mandated to report, and she did.
Right.
Melanie knew that as soon as CPS showed up to question Danny, he would know that she was back in Hooksett. So she confided in Eric about the abuse and her family troubles, and she said Eric volunteered to take him out, but she never believed that it would really happen. So they have this confession. Melanie claims that she stayed, so they concocted this, we're going to go to the state championship game. They get in the car together. Melanie's claiming that the whole time she did not believe that Eric Windhurst was going to shoot Danny. She then claims that they were in the woods. I'm doing all this by memory, if you can.
Yeah, I can tell.
They were in the woods together, and she stayed by a rock wall. And then Danny went up to the edge of the woods. She couldn't see him anymore. Or not Danny, excuse me. Eric went to the edge of the woods. She couldn't see him anymore. She heard a shot. Then all of a sudden, Eric's running through the woods telling her, get in the car. We got to go. So they get in the car. Eric is like, it's done, whatever. They went to a restaurant, believe it was McDonald's, and hung out for a while because they're supposed to be at this championship game all day.
Right.
And then she shows up at her parents' house, gets on the bus to go to Quebec. Then the next day was informed that her stepfather had been killed. Okay. There is one problem here that I discovered when I was reading the book. I wondered too. Eric Windhurst lives 30 miles away from Danny Piquette and has never met him.
So how would he know who he was?
Bingo. If she stayed by a rock wall, Megan.
How would he know?
How would he know which one to shoot? Because there were two men out there.
Because it wasn't Eric.
Or
it was her.
This is Melanie's version.
Here's the thing, too, with Melanie. She's already, I have to be very careful here. She's already been known to have lied about things like being assaulted and being raped prior. She's indicating that they moved because of sexual abuse, which we know is not the case. At least nothing has come up in any type of divorce records or transcripts that mom said, I'm getting away from this guy because he sexually abuses my kid.
I want to stop you right there because I feel that we need to do this. I have it in a few sentences down, but I want to do it right here.
Okay.
No one ever came forward at the end of this case. No one ever comes forward and says, I was sexually abused by Danny Piquette. We have absolutely, this was never explored in court. This is literally this woman's word against Danny, who is no longer here because he was murdered. Victor strongly believes that this is a huge lie, that this never happened. All of Danny's family believes that this never happened. There was, yes, he was a ladies' man, but there were no allegations of him being inappropriate with minors ever. And I feel that it is not fair of us to assume that what he was never given the option to even be tried for any allegation like this.
Sure. And for anybody that might be upset that we wouldn't believe a victim's statement, if she really believes that this happened, if it did happen, the only reason I'm bringing up that I have a concern with it is because she literally said that was the reason that they moved. Right. And we know that it's not.
Correct.
So that's what I wanted to put together. If it happened, it hasn't been explored in court. There's nothing to corroborate it. You could convict, by the way, not that this happened in this case, but off of a victim's statements alone. But
most definitely.
It's just it's not sitting right. So Eric
in the book does a very good job
of explaining,
letting everybody know.
Okay.
There was nothing to corroborate this, and we're not saying that it didn't happen, but there's, he is dead. He was murdered. So we don't know. But we'll get to a little bit more about Melanie that I think is going to
because you're going to tell me that we've interviewed Eric now, right? Because I got to know this.
Well, what happens first before they interview Eric is that they decide So I told you what Melanie tells the police.
Yes.
Right? Her version of all this. Remember when I mentioned when Duarte is giving compressions on Danny, he sees a neighbor putting mail in his mailbox.
Yes.
Melanie remembers that neighbor walking out to put mail in his mailbox because they flew by. They had to drive by Danny Piquette's house to get
away
to make it look like they were out of town.
Yes.
They had to head in that direction that drove them right by Danny Piquette's house. And she recalled seeing that person in that mailbox right before he gets called.
There's some corroboration there.
Yeah. So the next day after Melanie tells all this to the police, she agreed to meet the police officers at the Boise Police Department, and they had her call Eric Winters while they recorded it. They're trying to get Eric to admit his part. Eric was smart enough on the phone to not speak in... He spoke in roundabout ways, but he never openly admits his involvement. He does give enough information to confirm Melanie's account, though, but it's still not enough to move on the arrest. And the book does a good job of giving you like the transcript of it. It's very long. They were on the phone for hours.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times he was just like, Melanie, it's over. We're just going to forget about it. You just have to move on. And Melanie was using direct statements. But, when you shot him or when you all of this, and he doesn't take the bait.
He doesn't acknowledge.
Mm-mm. But what does come out is that Eric asks her if Danny ever really sexually abused her as a kid because he had learned through the course of their friendship that Melanie had lied about being mugged after soccer practice and that And Melanie responded, yes, she had lied about things for attention because she was a troubled teen, but that she wasn't lying about this. She had also lied about being raped.
Mm-hmm.
Eric knew this. So it's something that has just always sat on Eric's heart of later on in life, I find out that you've lied about all these things. So I did always wonder if you just wanted him dead so that you could come back to Hooksett and live or, Hopkinton, whatever, and live without him being around. And you just made up the sexual abuse so that it would instigate, add fuel to the fire and give a reason, right? She says, yes, I recognize that I did lie about those things. I was troubled. I did want attention, but I wasn't lying about this particular piece. So to give you some after the murder of Danny Piquette, Melanie spent her junior year back in Alaska with her mother, because she couldn't get along with Kathleen McGuire. Things were bad. She was put under, she wasn't allowed to just run around freely like she wanted to. So her junior year, she goes back to Alaska, but then her senior year, she moves back to Hopkinton to live with Kathleen McGuire and Philip Messier for her senior year. I can go into more detail, and if you want more detail about Eric and Melanie's life after high school, I don't think that it's very necessary for us to do it here, but you can read about it in the book. Erica did tell Melanie on the phone that day after what happened, he'd made the decision that he was never going to have a family because he didn't feel like he deserved one after what he did, and he knew that it could be taken away at any time.
So he just was worried it's a matter of time before I get caught now, 20 years later, and I'm not going to have kids.
Yep. And he never did. And at this point in time, when he's having this conversation with Melanie in 2003, they're 35. He says he hasn't lived a free day since that day in 1985. Eric was a master carpenter. That's what he did after school. That's what he was doing as the investigation continues. They do interview Eric, but there's not... It's the same old interviews that they've done year after year.
How is this kid such a good shot? Did he hunt?
Well, I will tell you about Eric. He did go into the military after high school. He was a sniper in the military.
I knew it.
But this shot happened.
It happened before. But if you...
He was just a
some
damn
people
good
have
shot.
a propensity. Yeah, you're just a damn good shot.
Yep.
But again, they wouldn't have been able to find that information because he was 17 years old. He wasn't a sniper. He wasn't a sharpshooter.
And they would have found it in the 90s had they followed up more on that particular lead, but it almost was like, well, yeah, in the military, he became a good shot. This happened he was 17.
Let me just throw out that when you're talking to someone who's a potential suspect and they tell you that they've been someplace and have an alibi, like, I don't know, a state meet, one would think that one would call other individuals to confirm that they were at the state meet.
One did. Mm-hmm.
Somebody, well, what do you mean one did? Like a friend?
No, the investigators did.
And somebody confirmed that they were there?
There was a lot of people that were like, of course they were there. They're the most popular, like they're super popular.
Those are assumptions.
Right.
Did you see Melanie Piquette there?
The book gets into more detail, but there is a group of Eric Windhurst's 5 core friends. They're called like the Gang of 5 or something like that. Some of them did know about this murder.
Really? And kept this quiet all those years?
It appears as
though,
though,
of a pact.
Megan, most of the town knew about this murder and kept it a secret. Because the reason for it also leaked out of, well,
they thought they were taking on a child molester.
Right. But here's what, in hindsight, everybody says, well, I just heard it. I didn't know if it was true or not.
It was a rumor.
It was a rumor. No one's like moving on rumor. Those 5 core group of friends, some of the men that end up testifying say things like, I just thought, they thought he was just trying to be a big shot. But many people were interviewed and said, well, of course they were there. He's the captain of the soccer team. Of course he was at the state championship final for the girls, whatever sport it was. I can't remember now what it was. But there was a lot of, well, of course they were there because the whole school was there. And then once you really, years later, get down in the nitty gritty of it, you're like, oh, wait, you know what? I didn't talk to them. I don't know if they were there. I didn't actually physically talk to them.
Right.
But in 1985, when they're doing these interviews and following up on these things, yeah, the whole school was at the state championship. Can you tell us what they were wearing? Those questions weren't necessarily asked.
Right? A Hopkinton High sweatshirt.
Right.
That's what they were wearing.
Mm-hmm. But I'm about to get into even more here.
Oh my God, there's more?
There is more. Mm-hmm. The investigation continues by Shackford, the private investigator, that Agrafiotis had hired to do this investigation. And an interview that is done, there's an interview that's done with an ex-wife of one of Eric Windhurst's brothers. Oh. She's confused as to why she was not contacted in 1992 when she wrote a letter to Richard Barron after the TV special aired. She thought it was extremely obvious where the letter had come from and always wondered why she wasn't contacted.
Well, you didn't put your name on it.
Thank you. That's why you weren't contacted. If you want to be contacted, put your goddamn name on it. You see, she had a troubled marriage with Eric's older brother. But at the time in 1985, the marriage wasn't troubled and she was a part of the family. And she said that right after the murder, there was a family meeting called and Eric confessed to his parents and his brother what he had done. The family then lied to the police anytime that they were questioned and told to never tell the truth. After all, the world is a better place without a child molester in it, right? But after watching how much the family was suffering with the loss of Danny Piquette on that TV special in 1992, that's what compelled her to write the letter. Not only did the Windhurst family know, but many of Eric's friends know, as I indicated before. Some of them thought he was lying to be tough. Others just wanted to stay the hell out of it.
Right.
But Shackford does his darndest to find out who knew what, and so that he could have enough to move with an arrest and prosecute. And it turns out through Shackford's investigation that most of the town knew the truth after all, but did not want to get involved. Many thought it was justified after the rumors of the sexual abuse had spread, and others thought it was just that, a rumor. It was apparent after Shackford's investigation that the town, whether knowingly or not, was keeping a huge secret, hence the title of the book, Our Little Secret.
Yeah, our.
Eric Windhurst is finally arrested on December 14th, 2005. He was living in Hooksett at the time. His recollection of the events was nearly identical to Melanie's until you get to the detail of where Melanie was at the time of the murder.
With him?
Eric points out that he had never met Danny Piquette. He did not know what the man looked like. Melanie had to have been next to him that day because she pointed him out to Eric as the person that he was to shoot. There's another theory that comes out here because of the fact that Eric Windhurst did not know Danny Piquette. there was a lot of struggle with the prosecution and the defense of what's our motive here? Like, it's just not enough to say that this brother, because they were never romantic. Eric and Melanie were never romantic. They're brother, sister, friends. What kind of 17-year-old is just so chivalrous to just go and assassinate a friend's, stepfather that he's never met before, right? So I will tell you that.
And let me throw in that, wouldn't logic indicate that if you're a good friend, Eric, you go tell the police?
Yeah,
that this bad man has sexually assaulted your friend?
Well, what is uncovered during the investigation is another possible motive for Eric Windhurst. And that is that his own father had been sexually abusing his stepsisters.
Okay.
Not related to his father directly.
But living in the home.
And
he was molesting them, and Eric knew about it.
And Eric knew about it. So it was a trigger when Melanie told him that her own stepfather had molested her as a young child.
I can see the conversation happening, can't you? Mm-hmm. Where they're friends
Bonding
and they're confiding in each other, and she's like, hey, my stepfather, or her stepfather was molesting her, and he's like, yeah, my stepfather molested my sisters.
No, my father molested my stepsisters.
That's right.
Yep. So they believe this is the possible motive. Now, this is something that Eric denies. This is not something also that was ever explored in court, because by the time Eric is arrested and goes through his trial, his father is 80 some years old, and there was stepsisters did confirm that did happen. Oh. They don't know if Eric knew of it or not. And so that is never explored in court. So I'm just going to say it doesn't end up being even needing to come out in court. And you'll see why in just a minute. But that's another possible motive with the police are like, okay, because it's not real strong to say, you just did this for a friend. So I'm laying that at your feet.
I mean, I'm a pretty good friend, Charnell, but
right.
It's not going to happen, honey.
No, honey. We'll go to the right avenues of the police and whatnot, and I'll be there for you to console you. But no, I'm not taking somebody out for you. At first, the defense, okay, sorry, I just told you that whole thing. I know this so well that now
You've jumped ahead, yeah.
So what happens is Eric goes ahead and pleads guilty to second-degree murder in 2006, okay?
Even though it was clearly premeditated?
Yes, they go ahead and they take a plea, and this is why.
It's a plea, okay.
Victor's family at the time, one of the people, they had many, many, many people to testify of what they knew. One of the people that would have had to testify is in Victor's family, was very, very ill with cancer. And they decided that it would be better to accept a second-degree murder plea from Eric 20-some years later than to make their family member go through the process of a painful trial and testifying. So that is what they do. He gets 15 to 36 years in prison.
Okay.
Victor's not crazy about it, but in the moment, this 20-some years later is better justice and not at the expense of harming their family member who was so ill with cancer at the time. Melanie Piquette Cooper was also charged for hindering apprehension. And she was super shocked to learn that she'd be serving a sentence of 3 to 6 years. She didn't think that she would get any jail time.
She could have been charged as an accessory, as a conspirator. Yeah. She could have been charged with the actual crime.
Mm-hmm. The judge did not believe that Eric would just know who to shoot, and that she didn't really think or know what was going to happen that day as they were walking through the woods with a rifle, and she had to literally point out the man to Eric. So she's like, the judge is like, your defense of you don't know, you sat by a rock wall. And she made up this story about, she was asking Eric when he was going to shoot, and he was like, when the flavor runs out of my gum that he was chewing. And Eric's like, that is total bullshit. None of that is true. She did have to point out who to kill. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was.
I will tell you that Melanie Piquette Cooper served a total of 15 months before she was back with her husband and children in Idaho. Good behavior, all that.
Yeah. I have goosebumps.
Eric Windhurst asked for a suspended sentence in 2016 after serving 10 of his 15 to 36 years. Numerous Hopkinton residents and friends have written letters to the court supporting Windhurst's petition and have to have his sentence suspended, with several offering him a place to live. Of course, Victor and the other members of the Piquette family did not want this, and it was denied at the time. However, in the fall of 2020, Eric Windhurst was up for parole. During the video conference, Victor held up a photo from his home. He now lives in Florida. He was holding up a photo of Danny Piquette.
His brother.
Mm-hmm. And he said, "Does this look familiar, Eric? Is this the man that you saw through your rifle sights? Let me help you with this. He was a loving brother. He was respected, well-liked businessman, and most of all, a loving, caring father who, believe it or not, family meant everything to." So no matter how much he tried, however, Victor Piquette was unable to convince the 3-person parole board to keep Windhurst locked up for another 20 years. He told the disappointed family members that his 15-year report card at the state prison, attending counseling, working on the League of the NH Craftsmen, because remember, he was a master carpenter, furthering his carpentry skills, was too clean, too impressive, and too hopeful to keep him incarcerated any longer. Eric Windhurst was paroled after serving 15 years, the minimum time for the sentence. And as it turns out, Rena Piquette's murder was not related to Danny Piquette's murder after all, but her case does still remain unsolved today, as I've said several times throughout this 3 parts. I want to make note as well. Oh, I already did this. But it bears reinstating that even after all of this, no one else stepped forth to make similar claims of any kind against Danny Piquette, even after his death. So we don't know. We don't know the truth about that. And I found this quote very interesting. So the prosecution pointed this out, that Eric, and I would argue Melanie as well, acted as a judge, jury, and executioner of Danny Piquette based on information that was never explored in court. So this is why vigilante justice can't happen.
No, it's why we have the criminal justice system that we have here.
I did actually look Eric up on Facebook.
Yeah.
And he has a Facebook account, and many were, when he put his profile picture up, so many were excited. They're like, "Hey, welcome home. Really glad to see you here." We know that he was a free man for 20 years without killing anybody else after this.
I'm glad you went there.
17 at the time.
He was 17, yeah.
I understand why he only served the minimum sentence, although painful for Danny's family.
Well, with some of the changes to how juveniles are sentenced, and those are recent cases, he would have likely had a sentence commuted in some regard anyway. Yeah. Like, were to have had a life sentence or death penalty, which doesn't happen with juveniles anymore. But so you pointed it out, and I'm going to say it because I'm sure that there are those of you who have family members or friends or know people, or even just became attached to a case where someone was a murder victim. Depending on the situation, when they do assessments and evaluations for risk, when they're getting ready to release people, and they do risk assessments, and then those are presented with a psychological or psychiatric to a panel.
Yes.
It is very often that somebody who has committed one homicide is not likely to reoffend and can be safely reintegrated into the community, even more so than like sex offenders, for example, who are at a much higher risk to offend, depending on how and what kind of sex offense was perpetrated. But even that has its own nuances.
I'm glad you said that, because our next case that we're going to cover, we're going to talk about that, Megan.
Even better. Great. So again, not saying that Charnell and I have an opinion either way on that, but we just know the psychology of it, that certain crimes that a person commits, depending on the situation, you may not be a risk to the public later.
And his psychological assessments all indicated that he is completely fully able to be rehabilitated into society with very, very low risk of ever reoffending.
In the meantime, I'm still sorry for his family that just went through such tragedy, like the older siblings too, who we didn't hear a ton about in here because they were already out of the house, but they lost their mom, they lost their brother. And all of their relationships with their nieces because they were taken away from them. And
you know, what was remarkable to me, though, is the dedication of Agrafiotis. He didn't have to. I think I praise Victor for calling that department every year, knowing he was going to get the same response.
Yeah, but Victor had to give his Thanksgiving fuck you, and
he was reminding them,
I'm still here.
We are still here, and we want justice for our brother and our loved one. And I think that is what kept it on the minds of Agrafiotis. And so he puts together this special unit that did a damn good job and finally was able to get the information that they needed to have some sort of justice for this family. And honestly, from the statements that Eric had made to the public, he literally said when he walked out of that prison in 2020, that is the first time since he was 17 years old that he was finally free.
Yeah, he kept the secret a long time.
Tormented by this. He knew that eventually they were probably going to catch up to him, right? They didn't pursue any other charges against, family members of Eric who may have knew this information and concealed it as well.
The whole time.
But yeah, well, that's just it. If you're going to for one, then it's like you have to for everyone else too. So they did not do that. Again, whether that's right or wrong, that's not.
Well, it's often the case because if you're only told something by somebody, that usually isn't enough information alone to convict you.
Yep.
Does it mean you should withhold that stuff? No.
Right.
But
so yeah, there's the case.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, very.
But here we are, police doing their job 20 years later, getting justice. And I don't know. I hope that all of us, if something tragic like this happened to us, I would hope that there's a Victor in our life that would keep fighting even when information can't keep coming forth. And then the added, just the tragedy of losing their mom. And I'm really glad her death certificate no longer says suicide, as it so clearly wasn't. But I don't think if anyone knows anything about that case, come forward.
Yeah, great PSA there at the end. There's still an unsolved case.
There is. Are you guys ready for a brain bath?
I am ready. I am ready for a brain bath.
That was hours of research, by the way.
So
I'm
good.
Super glad to get that off my chest here. I didn't even really read a lot of my notes.
I can attest that I was looking her in the eyes for most of the podcast, and she was going from memory. So yeah, I'm dove.
Using my mind's eye. That's my faraway look. But anyway. By the end of all this research, I was like, okay, I need a brain bath. What could I search up? I literally typed in pony for governor just to see. Mayor. Pony for mayor. I just wanted to see, has a pony ever been a mayor?
This came to your brain? Like it just went through your head?
It sure did. It was after recording our episode where I told everybody that my Peloton name was going to be Shetland Pony.
Yeah, I'm still scarred from that.
I don't actually own a Peloton, but I do use their app. But
you have to be a Patreon to hear that episode.
I am Shetland Pony on there if you guys want to be friends.
Oh, it's so silly. And I said, I'm going to join Peloton just to have a funny handle and harass people while they're working out.
And I know it's Shetland Pony, but if you were a Patreon, you'd know the Shetland part.
Don't listen to that brain bath. Give me something. Tell me about Pony for Mayor.
This is Pony for Mayor. The title of this is Ponies Participating in Politics.
Love it.
Patrick the
Weird.
Pony.
Are you trying to tell me there's horses' asses in politics? What?
I didn't say it.
If I could Winnie right now, I'd do it.
If I could Winnie right now. Patrick the Pony has won the hearts of people and is now the new mayor of Cockington, a village in England.
Jesus.
Of course I'm bringing you Cockington. That was a total accident, by the way. We are the Penis Podcast. This stuff just comes to us.
Like, no pun intended.
Right.
God.
So this was an opportunity that, he couldn't say nay to.
Aww.
That's how it's written. Isn't
That's
that adorable?
punny.
It is punny. Patrick has quite the group of followers, as the Shetland Pony can always be found in the town's local pub, The Drum, where his favorite drink is a pint of Guinness. I love this pony. The pony is such a celebrity that he has his own special drinking corner that is reserved especially for him. Patrick's original career began as a therapy pony.
Yeah.
When his owner, Kurt Petrakis took him to the pub to help locals who were mentally struggling during the pandemic.
Oh,
Patrick still spends times at hospitals and mental health wards. And according to the Mirror, hundreds of people have signed a petition asking for the pony to be the next mayor after their former mayor, Don Mills, passed away in 2019. For now, Patrick is the unofficial mayor as signers of the petition continue to grow. In preparation, Petrakis and his wife, the owner of Patrick, Hannah, have given Patrick his own office complete with lights and his own purple poppy emblem, a symbol for war horse memorials and animal charities, to pay homage to his heritage. Many local politicians have participated in networking events with Patrick in an attempt to shake hands and hooves. Yes.
If I walked into a pub where there was an honorary pony mayor, I would buy him a pint of Guinness.
Yes, me too. I love this. I feel like every town should have some sort of animal to be part of their mayorhood as well.
Some do already.
Yep. That's so true. Some already have horses' asses.
You know, I asked you after the last brain bath, the one from Patreon, by the way. So because it was so god awful. And don't even tell people what it is. They can tune into Patreon because people felt bad for me.
One Patreon called me a legend. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't disagree. But at the end, I said, please give me a sweet brain bath with like puppies or kittens or funny lawyers that happen to be cats on Zoom, right?
Yep.
And I even asked for nice, sweet brain baths from our Patreons because I was scarred for life.
So scarred.
Thank you for giving me Patrick the Pony today.
Yes, you knew this is exactly why I did. And
thank you for giving me a Shetland pony instead of Shetland pony
Shetland
also.
Pony.
Thank you.
But still, Shetland Pony is funny. I can't wait to hear when I'm doing a live workout.
I can't wait till we make you a t-shirt that says that.
Shetland Pony. I just want to hear one of the Peloton instructors shout me out during a live workout. Shetland Pony from Michigan. Keep it going.
Oh my God. See, this is why you do things like Phil McCracken and bend over and these ones on there. You are literally trying to screw with the Peloton instructor. I love it.
What can I say? Oh, God. Thank you guys for listening. If you have case suggestions, you can send them to, we're on all the social media platforms. You should follow us. We post pictures of our cases there when they're available. And just funny shit as well.
Yeah, terrible stuff.
If you feel, if you feel like joining Patreon to binge us and get your content sooner, then we are at patreon.com/crime curious. There's different levels there. And what else am I missing, Megan? We have a website. You can message us through that too, crimecuriouspodcast.com. Our mugs are up there. Not our mug shots, just our selfies.
Right. I mean, I hope we're getting close to Christmas as these are being released, right?
Right.
So, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa.
Don't murder your family.
Yeah. What was the holiday that they celebrated on Seinfeld?
Oh, God, you would ask me that. I cannot remember.
If Jason Macy was here, he would.
He would.
Yeah, tell us right away.
I can't remember, but you guys know it. If you follow it, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, you guys are going to know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that means it's time for me to tell all of you to keep it curious.
Look at you remembering. Yeah, all right.
Like a steel trap right here.
Oh, gosh. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.